Good day coders, here's to another video series of Let's Build Thumbtalk. In this video, we'll focus on the CRUD operation for our social media posts. So what I will do is in this video is try to keep it short, so I've got code that I've already prepped out, but I'll actually explain so that it's actually less error prone. So we'll start with our social media post services over here. So the first thing that we want to do is get all our social media posts. So we'll need a function over here in the services, right? And guys, if you're new to the video, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Alrighty, so and then once we've actually created that function, we'll actually create our object for our response. So this will give an API response that's expecting a post in the results, right? And then we'll try to also retrieve all posts that are active. So how we go about that is in this post repository, we try to find all posts that are active. These are posts that are not deleted. Alrighty, and then what we do is in our response, we try to map our response results. So how we do that is by this code over here, which is gonna be a response that result, and then what we'll do is just return response, right? So that's all we need over here to get all our social media posts, right? And this is just still in our services, right? Alrighty, so then the next thing that I'll actually want to then cover is get post by ID, right? So how we get the post by ID is okay through this function over here, right? So what we'll need to do is actually the same thing over here where we actually create the object of how our response is going to be like. This is just going to be for retrieving one post, right, by ID. And then we'll actually use the repository to get our post by ID. So how we do that is from our post repository, we just try to find one, and we try to find that post that is actually active, right? So and then what will actually happen over here is then we try to get the results and we'll return this response. Alrighty, so this will actually be get post by ID, right? And then another thing that we would want to do is actually try to delete like a post. So how we go about implementing our delete. So our actual deletes here are actually soft deletes, right? So we're not actually deleting a record in our database, right? So how we go about doing that is, so what we'll do is create our response object, which is just going to return the post that we actually deleted, right? Or if you want, you can just have like an error message. So you'll put in like a string, and then the result would be a string stating that you successfully deleted your post. But in this instance, we'll return the post that we actually deleted. So how we do that is try to find the post from the repository, right? And then we'll try to then do like an update, right? So what we then do is first we want to see if this post actually exists. So if this post doesn't exist, we'll actually return this error that says we cannot delete a post that doesn't exist, right? Else if the post actually exists, so we'll have like an else if, right? Or you can just have an else statement. So you'll say else if the post.username is not equal to the username who's user ID who's trying to delete this post, then this will give you like an error message stating that you cannot delete like a post that's not yours, right? um okay, righty. And then the next thing is that if this post actually belongs to a user, then we'll just want to set the is active to false, right? So we'll say this post dot is active equals to false, and then we just run our database update, right? So how we do this database update is from our post repository, then we'll just try to update that post, right? So this is expecting the ID of the actual post and yeah, that object that we're trying to update. So, and then we'll actually map up our actual response and return statement, right? Alrighty. So now then we would have actually created like our actual delete, which is actually like a soft delete since we're just updating. Alrighty, so the next function that we'll also try to cover, right, is getting our user post, right? So how we go about creating our user post is we'll have like a function which is get user post, and this user post will try to get it by a user ID, right? So then we do the same old over here, which is actually creating our actual response object, right? And then we'll try to then find our post all our users post by their ID, right? So how we go about doing that is, say, from the post repository we'll try to find all posts, right, that are mapped up to that user ID, and all active posts, right? So won't be showing posts that have actually been deleted, right? And then we'll then map out our actual response, right? So now we've created our get all posts, get post by ID, get user post. All right. So then another one would be like a, okay, we do have like a get post by ID, and then we'd also want to like just perform an update post. So it's just going to be an update caption, right? So here you'll just be updating a post's caption, right? So this function over here will just try to accept an update post caption DTO. So what we'll need for that is actually create that DTO, right? So what I'll do is come over here, try to copy the DTO and paste it in here. Right. So I'll just try to explain. So in this update post caption DTO, what we're expecting is a user ID that shouldn't be null, post ID that shouldn't be null and is supposed to be a UUID, and a caption, right? In actual fact, this caption shouldn't be null, but in the database, even though it's like nullable, but we actually want to put in the string of what we actually want to update, right? So yeah, that's how it should be. Then we'll just try to import that, right? And then what we'll do is actually try to create our response object, right? And then yeah, you guys can like take a moment to actually pause the video and actually, try it out, right? So then another thing is then what we'll then do is try to find the post that we're trying to update over here, and then we'll do the same thing that we did for like deleting posts, right? So how we can go about it is, if this post doesn't exist, we'll say you can't update a post that doesn't exist. Else if, then we'll have like another else if statement over here that says, if this post user ID is not equal to the user who's actually trying to update, then you shouldn't be able to update someone else's post, right? Then what we'll do is actually, then if everything is doesn't fall in these if statements, right, what we'll do is actually come over here and update your caption, right? So one thing that we want to do is actually return our actual response, right? So if this post doesn't exist, we want to return this response, and else if that, then we also want to return this, so that we don't go to the section if we had like an error somewhere here, right? And then we'll go about the updating of the post. So here we'll be doing like a update in that post repository, right? Pass in this post ID and that post, right? And that's all we just need for our actual update post, right? So let me actually see over here in our actual post delete if I actually did it right. So over here we can see that if we actually found these errors, we were supposed to actually return response, right? And then return response, right? So that as it actually gets to these errors, it actually just returns that error response, right? Okay, that's all we need, right? Because we've got our create, update, read, and delete, right? Although our delete is actually a soft delete. So now our next thing that we actually want to do is now go to our actual controllers and actually, create our controllers, right? So we'll go to our controller file, and what we'll do is actually try to create our get all post controller, right? So here's the method for our get all post controller, right? So what we're actually doing over here is actually creating our query runner, and then we're starting our actual transaction, right? And then what's actually happening over here will then create our actual post service and pass it this query runner, right? So after passing it this query runner, then the method that we want to call is get all post, which is the one that we created in our services, right? So, and then if we actually find like an error, then we just want to return this as those bad requests, right? Because all our errors will just throw a bad request, and then we'll pass in that actual error, right? And then if everything goes well, right, we'll just run the commit transaction. But since this is like actually like a get request, we're not actually making any changes to the DB, so we don't even need to have that. Alrighty. Yeah, so this is all good. So now the next thing over here that we want to do is actually say if we do try catch this error, and then we just want to throw an internal error and then just actually throw what the error is, right? So then the next thing is we'll then implement our get user post, right? So how we implement our get user post, here I'll just try to go line by line, right? So what we'll try to do is actually try to get like our actual try catch block, right? So in this try catch block is say if we catch an error, then we'll just return it as an internal saver error. And then here in our try section is we'll create our actual query runner and start our transaction. We'll try to retrieve our user ID, right, from our actual request parameters, right? Then after getting that, we'll actually then create like our actual post service. So this is how we create our post service. And then after creating our post service, then we'll actually call our actual get user post. Then we'll be passing in this user ID over there. If we do get an error, right, if we do get an error, then we'll just throw that error with its status code, right, and then actually have like our return JSON response. So that's just all we need. Alrighty. So yeah, so now we've actually now created this get user post, right? So let me just um so yeah, that's actually all good. I'll just try to increase the size for that. So the next thing that we would want to like implement is now our get post by ID, right? So with our get post by ID, we'll actually need its own function, right? And then we'll have its own try catch block, right? So with this try catch block, it's actually doing like the same thing, right? So I'll just copy that properly. Right, so what we're gonna have in our try section is we do the same old create, right? Run our start transaction, right? So how we retrieving this post is by the post ID. So this is going to be what we're passing in our actual query params, right? So we'll just try to retrieve our actual post ID, right? And then create our actual post service, right? Once we've actually created our post service, what we'll actually then now do is actually get our actual response, which is which will come from actually calling our get post by ID, right? And then have an if statement that checks if there is like an error, right? Then if not, then we'll just go about returning that, right? And yeah, this is all we need for actually getting our post by ID, right? And then the next function that we want to do is actually go about creating our delete post, right? So we'll have like a function for delete post, right? So this is going to be our delete post, right? So how we're going to actually be deleting our post is through our user ID. So we'll be passing our user ID and our post ID, right? So over here is we'll first run a query runner, right? And start the transaction over here. And then over here, we'll say from our parameters, try to get the user ID. From our parameters, try to get the post ID. Then we go about just creating our service, right? And then after, so we'll over here we'll just instantiate our post service, and then after that we'll just try to get our response, right, calling this delete post and passing it that post ID and the user ID, right? And then we check for errors every time because our errors are handled in our services, right? And then what's actually important over here is this section, right? So if we don't actually get any error from our actual services, right? So what we'll ideally then want to do is actually run this commit statement. So what this will do is every changes that we've actually made, right? Then this is where we actually commit them and save them to the DB. But if something then fails, then we just don't want to save those changes, right? So what we'll then do is first return our actual response results, right? And then if we actually do catch like an error, then it will actually come here, right? So what we then want to do is say await query runner dot rollback transaction. So this will actually roll back all our changes that we've made, right, in this delete. Alrighty, so and then the last method that we're gonna have over here is actually our actual update post caption, right? So we'll have a method for that. Alrighty, so what we'll need is we'll create our actual query runner and start our transaction. Then we'll instantiate our post service. So how we do that is by this code, 2 lines of code over here. And then what we'll then also want to do is then call our actual update post, right? So how we go about this is update caption, right? Update post caption. So what we'll need over here is actually, oh, in this we're actually trying to map up the body that's coming from our request. We're trying to map it out to our actual DTO, right? But we'll need to first import this, right? So what this does is it will just come over here and actually import that file where that actual DTL class actually or interface exists, right? Alrighty, so then the next thing that we'll then want to do is actually get like our actual response, right? So we actually call our update caption from our actual post service, and then we want to check for errors. If we do find an error, then we'll just return that, right? And then if we do happen to make some changes, so if we don't catch any errors over here and everything is successful, then we just want to commit all the changes we've made to the DB, right? and then just have a return this JSON, right, which is our actual response results, right? And then over here we'll just have this catch error, but what we'll then do is have like a rollback, right? So from our actual query runner, we'll just have a transaction rollback. So this is why we're going for actual transactions, so that we can do all our saves in our save data, like in our actual services. But if actually something goes wrong, then we can just roll back, right? So yeah, so these are the actual controllers that we actually need. So now moving forward to our actual routes, right? Because for all these controllers, we need to set like some sort of routes on how we actually gonna be calling them, right? So for get all user post, what you need is so this is for our get all post, I mean to say. So you'll have get all posts, and this will be calling our get all posts controller, right? And then for our get all user posts, right? So we'll have this route over here, which is get all user post. And then this is important, right? So here we'll be passing in a user ID as our request parameter, right? And then over here we'll just import this from our controller. So this request parameter is what we're actually using over here. So if we go to our get user post, what you'll see over here is we've got parameters.user ID. So this should be the same as what you're actually passing in your actual route. Alrighty. So then our next one would be actually performing our actual get post by a post ID, right? So this is the same logic with the parameter over here. So you pass it these colons, and then you just say the name of that parameter, right? And that should map up to what you've actually set out in your actual controller. So if we were to get post by ID, you'll see that we have a dot post ID. Alrighty, so moving on to the next two routes, right, is actually our update and delete, right? So over here we've got our update post caption, right? And we just need to import that, and then we also have our actual delete post, right? So this will have like our actual user ID and our post ID, right? And then righty, we'll have those stuff like saved, and then moment of truth, where we actually now run this. Alrighty. So now that that is like actually running, so I think we'll just need to also start up like our actual Docker. Yeah, before we can, you know, and that might take a bit of some time. Yeah, because our actual database is running from like our Docker container, so which has like our actual Postgres, right? So over here, just open up our Docker, just waiting for that to start up. Okay, once that's started up, we'll just run this Docker compose up -d to run that from the background. Then we'll just clear that and just run a doc um npm run start, right? This should start up our actual API. And then what we'll then do is actually go to our actual postman, right? Okay, this is taking a bit of some time. So we'll actually go to our actual postman and actually try calling these, right? So we're just waiting for that to just fully start up. Okay, yeah, now it's actually started up. So for our actual get all posts, right, you'll see over here is this is something but that I've covered in the previous video, right? So our actual post routes are mapping to these posts, right? So what you'll then need to do is actually when you get all post, we'll pass in that, and then you'll see our base URL is just actually localhost and this 3002, right? So when we run this get all post, this will retrieve all our active posts. Righty, how do I then increase this? This will just, retrieve all our active posts. And then over here, we'll also try to test out our get user post and passing it like a user ID, right? This will get all our user posts with that user ID. And if I were to change this to like a 2, which is then a user ID that doesn't exist, then you'll see we won't get any posts, right? So yeah, so that's how that one will work. Then another thing is we'll try to get this post by the post ID. Then you'll see over here, this is now, right? So let's try to retrieve a post that actually exists, right? So we'll just add in this right over there. And if we pass this, this will actually then retrieve that post, right? And then the next thing that we then want to do is actually try to perform like a delete post, right? So this delete post, how it actually works is we'll pass in like our actual user ID over here, and then our actual post ID that we actually want to delete. So what would happen if we actually try to delete this, right? This will say you cannot delete a post that doesn't exist because this post was deleted and doesn't exist, right? So what we'll do is actually paste in a post that does exist, right? And then if we were to delete that, that will actually return this post that we're actually deleting. So if we try to delete again, that should throw an error that you cannot delete a post that doesn't exist. Alrighty. So if you can see over here in get user posts, right? So this post which was testing, right? And we'll just remember this 121, right? If we try to retrieve these user posts, we shouldn't get that post, right? So you'll see that that post was deleted, so we're not actually retrieving it. So then we know that this delete post worked successfully. And then we also have another one over here which is just trying to update like a post. So let's see what will happen if we try to update this post, right? um Alrighty, so this would have updated that post. Then let me just try to get like another post over here, which is this post, right? And then try to add this, right? And then over here, we'll just say YouTube video, right? So this is what we'll actually try to update it to. So if we try to get this specific post, right, this should then have like the updated value, right? So which is, right, YouTube video. So that we know that our actual update actually worked, right? And then what happens if we come over here and actually delete this post, right? So now we would have deleted this post, and what would happen if I just try to update this post? Right, this will say you cannot update a post that does not exist, right? So we actually do have like our actual CRUD operations over here, and in our last video we actually did like go about like implementing how we actually create like a post, right? So this would be new post post fix, right? And then if we were to create this, that would have like created the post, and under that user post you'll actually see all those user posts, right? So if I were to come over here, get the post by ID, right? So if I were to try to get the post by ID using this, then you'll see new post fix. Alrighty, so that's all our CRUD operation actually like created, right? So with that being said, if you liked the video, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, peace.